Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ryan Suter. I'm one of the senior investment managers here at Sharewise, and we're here with Brent Barnes. Now, Brent is the Chief Executive Officer and the Managing Director of LBT Innovations. Now, Brent's been kind enough this morning to lend us his time and expertise to give us a presentation on LBT and how they're going, as well as answer a couple of questions following the presentation. So, as per usual, if any participants would like to submit questions for me to ask Brent after the presentation, please do so through the Q&A function on Zoom. Obviously, I'll have a couple to start us off with. But Brent, thank you very much for your time again this morning, and it's all yours.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. I'll just share my screen here and get moving. So thanks for joining and listening to the LBT Innovation story. We're a listed company on the ASX, and we're based and headquartered in Adelaide in South Australia. The normal disclaimers apply being a listed company. So look, the space we operate's quite a large and exciting opportunity, and it's microbiology, specifically looking at aseptic manufacturing. And so when you think about who our customers are companies who manufacture pharmaceutical products or manufacture drugs. And obviously that business is a growing and a large business, and we've got some stats here on the screen that kind of talk through that size of the total addressable market. So a bit over nearly 3 billion Australian dollars. 14,000 manufacturing sites are registered with the US FDA, and really what our focus is from a sales execution perspective at the moment is being laser focused on these top 20 pharma companies by revenue. And I'll talk a little bit more in the presentation about our relationships and our partnerships there. But what we're looking to do is to be laser focused with a nimble sales team globally and get traction into this kind of growing market segment. I've called it land and expand, and really what that means is that we focus our efforts on a big pharma customer, as an example, AstraZeneca. We work with them around what their needs would look like. They go through a validation process, and then the goal would be that they would look to standardize our technology through their largest manufacturing site. So these big customers, if you like, could represent multiple instrument sales and multiple opportunities. So that's all part of our sales strategy, a very focused sales strategy on a global basis. And when you consider pharmaceutical drug manufacturing and the costs and implications of getting it wrong, it can be really tens of millions of dollars. In the worst case, an extreme example, a drug could be in the market and it'd be deemed to require a product recall, and that recall of the product is going to be very costly for these organizations. I think kind of scaling back to some other examples, it could be during an inspection. So the manufacturing of drugs is a highly regulated process, and part of that regulated process is the likes of the US FDA and various global regulators coming into the pharmaceutical company and auditing their manufacturing process. And the part of that process that we look after or we contribute to is the environmental monitoring process. And this is kind of a mandatory process that happens through all manufacturing sites globally. It's a sterile environment or an aseptic environment, and culture plates are used to measure the cleanliness of that environment on an ongoing basis. So really the point here of this slide is to say, you know what, there's an existing process that happens. It's mandated across all manufacturing sites globally, and the cost of getting it wrong is significant. And so from a customer perspective, if there's technologies, if there's an ability to mitigate your risk and to improve that process, our customers are very interested in that. And really that's where we fit. And this kind of is the introduction into our product and the need that we're solving. So APAS is our automated plate assessment system. And what APAS does is it will automate the reading and the reporting of a culture plate that's used as part of that environmental monitoring process. And it will do it more efficiently, more accurately than the current process that exists. So what we do is that we take a photo of the plate, and we've trained an algorithm to interpret the various colonies or bacteria or mold that might grow on these plates. And so it is a machine learning based application. We've been developing it for about 10 years. So we kind of started in this AI space before AI was a buzzword and everyone's doing it. Actually, our patents, we have a family of 4 patents that surround the imaging station. So the lighting, the calibration tools, but also the algorithm itself. And so this is a bespoke custom technology stack around a machine vision technology that we've been working for many, many years and is now completely validated with demonstrated performance. To explain a little bit and help visualize what I mean around this environmental monitoring workflow, I mentioned it's a mandatory process that happens in every pharmaceutical manufacturing facility where they're manufacturing sterile products. And so on the furthest left side is a culture plate, and there's a couple of different sizes of culture plates. It's called a settle plate. And what happens is that those settle plates are put inside of the clean room and they're rotated every 4 hours. And what happens is that the atmosphere within that controlled environment settles onto the culture plate. That's why they call it a settle plate. And there's also a contact plate where they kind of dab various surfaces, dab clothing, and then they again rotate every 4 hours. It then goes into an incubator. You can kind of see a couple of examples of what an incubator might look like. And after a 5-day incubation period, and what's happening over those 5 days is when it comes out of that clean room environment, what is trying to happen is that microbial growth or bacterial or mold growth is looking to interact with the agar plate and identify colonies. Now, you would expect most of the time in a Class A clean room that there is no microbial growth, certainly very limited growth detection. But if there is something that's growing on the plate, it's super important that microbial growth is identified. And so that's that kind of last part of the workflow. So after you've got your incubation, so these plates are rotated every 4 hours in the clean room, they then sit in an incubator for 5 days. After 5 days, they're taken out of the incubator and they're physically taken to a workbench, and you have a microbiologist take off the lid and visually inspect what's growing. So there's no microscope, it's a visual inspection, and they've got 2 microbiologists look at all of these plates. And the reason they have 2 is because industry knows that there are errors that are made. And so you've got errors with respect to identification of the microbial growth, and then also errors that can occur by manually keying in those information into the laboratory information management system. And so why it's a critical part of that workflow is that it's tied to the release of that product, that pharmaceutical product being released into the market, being safe and effective. And so, most of the time, the clean room is clean. There is no growth. That result is super important, and it goes into the record for that pharmaceutical product, and then that batch of product is released into the market. Obviously, if there is growth identified, well, then the product is not released into the market, and there's really a series of quality activities that go to determine whether that batch of drugs could be released or whether in fact they need to be scrapped. So that's the current workflow, happens in every single lab that is manufacturing in a Class A, Class B clean room globally. And so what we've introduced is an instrument and a technology that automates that reading of the workflow. So you can see the rest of the workflow remains the same, and that's important because customers don't want to make big changes to their existing validated manufacturing process. So what we're doing is that we're substituting the review of, conducted by 2 microbiologists with an instrument. And APAS Independence is an instrument, a high throughput instrument that will do the reading, reporting automatically without the need for a scientist being involved in reviewing all of those plates. And so most of those don't have growth, like I mentioned, and so it means that the batch of products are released automatically. And if there is any growth identified, it is flagged and it's reviewed by a microbiologist. The operation of the instrument is super simple and really easy. And so you've got kind of a front view of the instrument at the top of the screen, and then a top view or a topical view of the instrument at the bottom of the screen. And so you kind of think from that workflow perspective, what happens now in terms of this APAS assisted automation is that plates will come out of the incubator and a scientist or a technician will now come to the instrument. So rather than take the plates to a workbench and have them reviewed, like I said, by 2 microbiologists, someone will come to the instrument, and the first step is that they'll put the plates into the instrument on the input side of that instrument. They'll start a session using the graphical user interface, and then they walk away. And what happens is that APAS will move those plates from the left-hand side of the instrument into the imaging station in the middle. So a photo is taken of the plate, top and bottom. An algorithm then automatically interprets whether there's any growth that's happening on the plate. And based on that primary decision, the plate will then move to the right-hand side of the instrument. And so it will physically sort those plates that have growth, so the positive plates, or those plates that need to be reviewed, against the negative plates. And we would expect over 90% of those plates not having any growth, and therefore those results are automatically interfaced to the laboratory information management system. So a really simple operation. It operates at 200 plates per hour. So we say it's about 3 times faster than the current reporting process that's done by the 2 scientists. And I think this kind of is a bit of a game, actually. We try to help visualize. We did this at a couple of the trade shows. So obviously manual colony counting is something that happens, like I said, in all facilities. And there's a great picture of what a plate would look like. And you can see so there's different growth there. There's a mold on this plate. And we did some tests actually within our own company, with our own scientists, but also looked at some of our customers and had them review this same plate. And, it was quite interesting seeing the divergence or the differences of responses that we received from scientists looking at counting colonies on this plate. And it might look simple, perhaps, when you look quickly, but when you look at some of these colonies across the label and some of the smaller colonies and those that perhaps overlap over each other, you'll kind of get into that detail that, in fact, you actually do get some challenges with respect to that manual review. And of course, from an APAS perspective, so here's that same image and kind of provided some count there. So you can see that actually there are 39 different colonies that have grown on that plate. And so you can see the arrows pointing to each of those colonies. And the benefit here, I think, is really obvious when you consider what automation could represent for our customers. And so the great thing about APAS is that it's going to review that same plate in the same way every single time. You're going to get the same result every time. And we know through our studies that you give that same plate to 10 different microbiologists, you're likely going to get perhaps not 10 different results, but you're certainly going to get different results across a consensus group. And so, we really know that APAS, through our validation studies, improves the traceability, the quality, and efficiency of culture plate reading for this application. And I already kind of spoke about the costs of getting it wrong. So we know that this is a really important part of releasing safe and effective drugs into the market. AstraZeneca is a cornerstone customer of ours, and this is a snapshot or a highlight of some of the results of a validation study that they completed. And what the table shows there, it's about 6,000 plates that were reviewed, and they were reviewed by their manual process. So 2 microbiologists looking at all of those nearly 6,000 plates. And then those same plates were run through our APAS independent system. And so what we found is that for any of the plates that had growth, APAS identified all of those plates. So 100% sensitive. There was no plate that was missed as part of that. And there was a false positive rate of 5.9%, or call it nearly 6%. And what that means is that APAS identified growth that was on the plate that actually there was no growth. And some examples of those were bubbles in the agar itself and some interferences with the labels. So the most important metric associated with this study was making sure that if there was any growth on the plate, APAS identified it. And this study demonstrated that with 100% sensitivity. And so then you say, well, why are AstraZeneca interested? They generate 30,000 environmental monitoring plates every single month. So nearly 1,000 plates every day comes out of that incubator gets taken to a workbench to have 2 microbiologists look at all of those plates. So a huge amount of kind of plate volume, if you like, and a hugely manual process. And over 98% of those are negative, and they've identified through their current process that they know that humans sometimes make mistakes, and from that data integrity perspective, keying in those results are prone to error. So that's why that's why AstraZeneca are interested in our APAS technology. And a key learning here was super interesting, and they've presented this data at global conferences. And what this kind of shows is actually one plate that was missed. So of the nearly 6,000 plates in this study that they did, there was one plate that was missed by their current standard process that APAS identified. And so you can see there's on the left-hand side, it's a very kind of enriched image of the colony, but it's a tiny colony, about 10 o'clock on the plate, right near the side of the rim. So APAS identified that, but it was, however, missed in their manual process. So really powerful kind of data, and I think a really great advocate of the technology and where automation can really help. We do have some competitors, and so this slide kind of summarizes that. And so reflecting back on the workflow, what our competitor instruments and technologies provide is that they do some automatic reading, but they also automate the incubation. So if you remember that slide, you've got a clean room, you put the culture plates in the clean room, rotate them for 4 days, then load them into an incubator, and it stays in the incubator for 5 days, and then it's read automatically. And so the difference between our two approaches is that our technology is an endpoint reader. So after 5 days, they're taken out of their existing incubators using their existing media, and APAS reads them. The competitors have the incubator and the reader together, and they also have proprietary media. And so you can see, I won't go through all the details there, but it is a more expensive technology because you're automating the incubator and the reader in one. And really the biggest limitation here is that the incubation limits the ability to scale the number of plates that can be processed. Remember, AstraZeneca generate 1,000 plates every single day that come out of the incubator that need to be read manually by a microbiologist. And so APAS will easily do 1,600 plates in an 8-hour shift. And this slide kind of maybe puts a bit more data around that. So this is we'd classify a case study of a medium-sized lab. So 500 plates coming out of that incubator needing to be read per day. Remember, I said AstraZeneca in one of their large locations generates 1,000 plates every single day. And so in this scenario, kind of comparing APAS to those two competitor products I showed you on that previous slide, one instrument is, because it's an endpoint reader without the incubator, one instrument can process 1,600 plates in an 8-hour shift. If you had the 3P system, you're really constrained by the incubation capacity. So their incubation capacity is 300 plates. The Growth Direct system is 660 plates. And so the maths there is pretty straightforward. You divide 500 plates, because that's how many plates need to be read on a daily basis, by the number of plates that can come out of that incubator on a daily basis. And so what this shows is that if you had a lab generating 500 plates that need to be read on a daily basis, you need multiple instruments, and the cost difference is significant. So you're talking, $0.3 million versus millions of dollars by comparison. So a massive savings with respect to our technology, our approach, compared to the incumbent technologies that exist, of which really have low penetration. Not many of them exist globally. The revenue scale is quite attractive. So it's about $1 million of revenue Australian, and that's over a 5-year period. And so when changes are made to automation in this highly regulated environment, you don't make them quickly. And so typically it goes through a validation cycle, and you kind of lock in over a number of years. And so there's a combination here of upfront CapEx, which is the instrument itself. So about 450,000 Australian dollars is the instrument cost, if you like. So that's the upfront. And then you've got some reoccurring revenue. So you've got reoccurring revenue for the license. So that's the AI software. reoccurring revenue on the service. So that's the maintenance for the physical instrument itself. And then we've got some once-off implementation services. So there is an annual software license and annual support cost that, ballpark is somewhere around 70,000 Australian dollars on an annual basis. AstraZeneca, I mentioned that, that was their pilot validation study, and they very clearly stated, and some pictures here are a presentation that they gave at a conference in Germany earlier this year. They've provided some strategic R&D funding. That funding is being paid and the project is now finished. And what they're doing at the moment is going through a formal validation. So they did a pilot validation earlier, which is the data set I shared in this presentation. And they're going through a formal validation. And once they finish that, they've indicated they expect to standardize APAS throughout their largest manufacturing sites globally. And so we're expecting that kind of standardization to occur in the second half of this calendar year, following what we expect to be a positive validation process completed. We have an experienced board of management team. We're with a lot of skin in the game. We raised money at the end of last year, $4.5 million. We've had some board changes to really update our strategy, and we've really kind of heavily invested into the company. So board management now owning about 23% of the company, and very meaningfully were involved in the raise at the end of last year. You can see the kind of share graph here, and we raised money at 0.5 cent. You can see that kind of entitlement off the line, and so we've had a really positive re-rating of our market cap and the company towards the end of 2023 and moving through into 2024. The spike that you can see there is in March, when we finalized the validation of our technology. So this was demonstrating that the product is now kind of fit for purpose. It works for the application, and we've built this whole dossier of information that demonstrates the technology works and is fit for purpose. And on the back of that, we sold a couple of instruments. So an instrument to a group in Perth called Novacina. They're a contract drug manufacturing organization, and also Thermo Fisher Pharma services. So a couple of additional customers in addition to AstraZeneca being our cornerstone customer. So look, to wrap it up here in terms of what investors should kind of look for catalysts and where our kind of outlook is. We've now finalized the R&D. So we've finished, over the last 12 months, validating the AI platform works. That is now finished. We've sold a few instruments. Really, I think what to look out for here is the AstraZeneca validation work. We've indicated in our quarterly that's expected to happen in the September quarter. So I think kind of September, October timeframe. And the other update we've had more recently is that in addition to AZ, we will commence an evaluation with 2 other really large pharma companies. So large multinational companies, kind of top 20. So AZ equivalent in terms of that land and expand strategy. But, that is a near-term opportunity that's going to kick off that evaluation process. So really moving through into multiple instrument sales when we think about F25 and execution against that commercialization plan. So I'll pause there, Ryan, and open up to any questions.
Thank you very much, Brent. Really appreciate the presentation. Very thorough, and actually it looks like a really exciting opportunity. So I'll just jump straight into some questions. So obviously, it appears like you guys are very much targeting some very large organizations. Now, when it comes to negotiating with these organizations, what is your actual sales strategy? Is it very much trying to get people in the room? Is it direct sales spokesman? Is it you're working through a distribution chain?
Yeah, we're being super laser focused, Ryan. So we've got 2 salespeople, one in the US and one in Europe. And so our strategy is to be super laser focused on those big pharmaceutical companies that have multiple manufacturing facilities. And the reason why we're doing that is because I don't want to spend a lot of capital to establish and build a global sales force. That takes a lot of time and is really expensive. And what we've found in our relationship with AstraZeneca is that these big pharma customers are very sophisticated in their review and their assessment of changing anything across their manufacturing process, because it's such a highly regulated environment. And so having a salesperson in each of those large regions is definitely helpful, because it allows us to open up the doors to start those evaluations. but typically it's a centralized group that does all the decision making. So I don't necessarily need 5 or 10 salespeople knocking on everyone's door at the moment. I want to be really laser focused on those customers who have the propensity or the ability to standardize our APAS platform across their larger sites. They do their validation once, and then that opens up the opportunity across their network. So it's being really laser focused in a really kind of cost conscious way that we've kind of proven out to be quite effective so far.
Oh, well, it's brilliant to hear that it's being effective. Now, just shifting to a bit of a value proposition question. Now, obviously, you said that it's a highly regulated space. It's obviously, all laboratories are going to have to do this. But with already having the microbiologist there, what's actually the value proposition for making customers want to buy the product?
Yeah, it's three things. The first is improving traceability of the result, quality of that result, and then the third is efficiency. And I'm quite deliberate. It's in that order. And so we're not trying to put microbiologists out of work, or they're not going to become completely redundant. What they will do, however, is that they will get moved on to other more meaningful and value-added activities within the pharmaceutical manufacturing space. And so, when you think about the current process, you've got someone manually keying in results into the system. And, if Brent Barnes is looking at the dish and I'm putting in my result, there's no permanent record of what Brent Barnes is looking at. When you think about how APAS is trying to solve that, well, now we've got an instrument that has a permanent record of that image. We have automated image analysis, and we have an automated data trail or data upload of that result into the laboratory information management system. So we're improving the traceability, we're improving the quality, and we're doing it in a more efficient way than the current standard process. And that's the really simple value proposition when we go and talk to our customers around how APAS can solve a need for their current environmental monitoring practices.
Okay, so obviously you did also discuss the fact that there's already competition that's been in the market. I don't know how long it's been in there. But realistically, why would a company choose to go with the APAS product as opposed to going with a product where they can have the entire system, including the incubation, built in?
Yeah, no, great question, Ryan. Look, I think the biggest one there is just around cost and scale. And so if I gave the case study of the lab doing 500 plates, but look, let's have a real example. AstraZeneca have published. They have their one facility that's in the UK that generates 1,000 plates every single day that need to be read by a microbiologist. They'll probably end up buying 2 systems of ours, but they could probably, just have one. Comparing that to the other platforms, because you're combining the incubator and the reading in one, you're looking at 8 to 10 systems. I mean, it's just such a different scale, and that's where AstraZeneca, having looked at the competition that exists, that's where really they created we have a partnership with them. The other technologies weren't fit for purpose. They didn't make economic sense. And when you think about the endpoint reading and decoupling the incubator, that's a really big, significant variation in approach that we've taken to automating this manual process. I think the other big differentiating factor is we say use your existing incubators, use your existing media. All of those customers already have media, already have the infrastructure built in. Whereas if you move to those other platforms, you've got to use special media and you've got to replace effectively an incubator that you've already kind of spent money on. So there's some of the reasons why we kind of think we're better placed from a competitive perspective.
Understandable. Now, I'm just going to pivot here. You're going to have to excuse my ignorance. Now, when it comes to actually reading the culture plates relative to releasing drugs, into the marketplace, how important is the the whole culture plate reading?
Yeah. So, there are a number of factors that go into releasing safe and effective drugs into the market. So this isn't the only result, but it is one result that is important relative to other results. So, there are a whole bunch of controls that are in place around making sure the clean room environment is clean. And really, when you think about environmental monitoring and the reading of the plate, that is one of the important controlling factors that goes into the manufacturing record for the batches of those products that go out into the market. So it's not the only piece of information, but it is a critical piece of information that you do require, along with other pieces of information, to release the product into the market. So without it, you can't release the product. And so it constitutes as an important data point to release safe and effective drugs into the market.
Okay, all right. Well, I appreciate that clarification there. Now, I only got one question here left from me. I'd just like to remind participants, if they have any questions, please submit them using the Q&A function on Zoom before we just wrap things up. Now, obviously, you guys raised capital at the end of 2023. You talked about AstraZeneca giving you a bit of a financial grant. Do you have any more plans to raise capital either on market or off market before the end of the calendar year?
Tough question, right? Yeah, no, look, we're not actively looking to raise capital. We structured the capital raise that we closed out in December. It was an entitlement offer that went to existing shareholders, but they had some options that were associated with them. And we had about $1 million of options that were exercised in the last week of June. And so, you know, that's clearly, and that's about 3 months ahead of expiry, which is the middle of September. So it shows a bit of confidence in our outlook. So what we expect is those options to be exercised, and obviously that supports some further inflows from the company. We are expecting a positive result from AstraZeneca, and I've said that's going to happen in the second half of this calendar year. And so there's some more cash inflows that come in addition to our R&D tax. And so when we kind of look at what our internal forecasts are from both sales execution but also R&D tax, the options that are going to be raised, we're not actively looking at capital. And so, we're really looking to extend our runway here and give us enough time to execute on the commercial activation milestones that we've got ahead of us. And that's super exciting. And we'd love to see a path towards a cash flow positive nature for this company on a go-forward basis.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm sure investors are going to be really keen to hear that update. Well, Brent, that about wraps everything up. Now, before we close it all out, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think we've covered most of it, Ryan. I think, look, just watch this space. If you're new to LBT, put us on your watch list. I think we've got some great evidence of being able to deliver on some key milestones over the last 6 months, and we're really at a positive inflection point here as we move through into commercialization. And so we've got some great opportunities, I think, with AstraZeneca, but don't underestimate these other two companies that we're working with as well. And we've also, sold some products to Novacina based in Perth and Thermo Fisher Pharma Services. So I think there's enough suite of validation, if you like, that the technology is fit for purpose. But, we're at the bottom of a mountain of opportunity. We have so much opportunity in terms of customers who could benefit from our technology that we are at that point of early commercialization. And so that's where I'd say put us on your watch list as we tick off these milestones. I think we would expect a re-rating, or would certainly hope for a re-rating, but that's always market dependent.
Very true. All right. Well, again, thank you very much, Brent. Really appreciate your time, and thank you very much, LBT. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers.